Good day, everyone. It's a pity that it's in English, but possibly that's for the best. My name is Borys, and I'm a game designer, and the last game I was working on is The Alters, and today I'm going to tell you a thing or two about non-linear narrative, or at least our approach to non-linear narrative. As you might know, The Alters are quite heavy narrative-driven game. So we wanted and we were forced to make some experiments about its narrative style, about its narrative procedures. But I would like to start from a sort of very beginning, because I think it's worth emphasizing that we as humans are very storytelling creatures. Our mind likes to operate on stories. We remember things better if there are stories. Like there are many techniques of remembering things, making stories out of them, out of numbers, out of lists. And actually, we're in pure data. We are adding more data to data just to remember it better. So I'm telling it because I want you to realize that we are really good in telling stories, making stories, and we do that for thousands of years, maybe even longer. So we have experience and we have theory of telling stories. As you probably know, it's a long theory. I think that Aristotle wrote his Poetica almost 2,500 of years ago. Hollywood has bunch of handbooks on how to write immersive, interesting scenarios, and so on. We know how to do that, and somewhere in between, during this way of telling stories, someone had the idea what it would be if it would be maybe even better to make a listener, viewer, the recipient of a story a part of this story, right? It sounds great, and it's not new idea, because well, in theater such experiments were conducted possibly centuries ago. We made, of course, classic role-playing games. We did that non-linear narrative for a long time. But as you expect, when we kinda built computers, we realized that now we have a really good medium to tell people non-linear stories, right? So we started to do that because it's a great promise. It promises great adventure every time, and we started to think, how can we tell non-linear stories? Because in general, it's as you know, we're just telling. It's not that complicated. Instead of one story, we're telling a bunch of stories that are somehow interconnected, that react to players' decisions, to players' choices. It's really not that complicated, right? So we thought that, okay, we got a computer. We had a computer, and computer can do certain things. Computer can remember many variables. We can use it to remember everything we need, because basically nonlinear story is represented by two things. It's represented by the world, and it's represented by dialogues between player and non-player characters, right? Or maybe even between NPCs. So we can do that. It's quite easy. We can remember whether event in the world occurred. We can branch dialogue, checking whether the event occurred or didn't occur yet. we can give player dialogue options, then we can remember what options the player chose, and after that we can, of course, alter the game world accordingly to what a player did. It's very, very easy. But as you might expect, the thing gets complicated and gets problematic with the scale, because here everything is under control, right? We have bunch of variables. Well, we could expect that expanding the list of variables, we won't lose the meaning of the story we're telling. But there are other aspects that I want to tell you about, not only the scale of the project, not only the scale of the story. So how it begins, because every story begins with the writer. Writer writes a story, and writers tend to write always linear stories, right? Writer in his head has always some kind of main story. You can call it golden path, for example, and then he will make alterations to this story. He will put some ifs to the story. What if a player goes right, or if a player goes left, if a player decides to kill someone or decides not to kill someone. But in the beginning we have quite consistent linear story with some ifs. Well, the problem is that the game is not only a story. A game is a quite complicated system, and the story is well, maybe not just, but it's certainly a part of this system. So the thing is that such a story, and especially non-linear story, has to become a system itself, and we have to change the thing that writer wrote into some kind of system. What you see on this picture is part of such a diagram of this system. It's well, we call it high-level logic, because generic name. And the thing is that when we start to think of a story as a system, some things emerge from it, because one thing that emerges is dialogues, because it happens that when we make a system, we raise some questions. For example, we start to wonder what happens whether, for example, writer wrote some linear set of dialogues. Character A talks to character B, then he talks to character C. But in the meantime, when we make the system of it, we are thinking about some things that are happening in game world. Like character B can be hurt, he can be absent, he can be somewhere else, or even he can be dead. And this is what happens a lot. And here starts the cooperation between the designer and the writer. It's sort of forth and back work when we are working, doing our best to ensure that our system still tells the story that writer intended, right? And so we go. When we have this high-level logic of the story, we start to implement it. And during the time that we implement it, writer is writing dialogues, of course. Here you can see, or you cannot, but that's a general idea how logic of the story can look in the game, because there are many factors to it. The story becomes a system where characters from this story are actually changing the world. The character can destroy something, character can get some resources, character can put himself into fight with another character, and this all is part of actually narrative in the game. And as we progress, we need tools for that. In Alters, we started with RTC. You might know RTC as it's well, it's not industry standard, but it's kind of widely used tool. And we started with RTC, hoping that it's the only tool we'll ever need. But it happened that we needed, well, more custom approach. Just because, not because RTC is bad, but connecting RTC with our system, with our game, happened to be too complicated, especially too complicated for programmers, and they were like, okay, we will build our own system, it will be easier, it will be faster. That's because during such dialogues, when they are truly not only non-linear, but they are truly part of the game, we do many other things. We change emotions of characters taking part in the dialogue. We put, of course, voiceovers. We put animations. We check multiple conditions. We check not only simple events in the world, but we check whether we have enough resources. For example, we check whether some modules in the base are built or not, and so on. So we are forced to build our own dialogue system, which one of our programmers called Node for some reason, because it has many nodes. And as you can see, the dialogues get bigger, because we have very, very creative writer, and she wrote some very, very big dialogues. That's how it looks further in the game. As you can see, these yellowish nodes are players' lines. The other way. Blue are player lines. The yellowish one are dialogue options. Yellow are dialogue options for the player, and blue are characters' lines. But in between, you see a whole set of violet boxes. You can see somewhere, maybe not in this dialogue, in the former one, you can see green boxes. These are not parts of dialogue itself. These are parts of what dialogue does to the game world, right? And also, as the story progresses, and we chose to give a player quite a big liberty, because we thought that it would be nice to have a system that allows the player to decide not only what characters he wants to use during the game, but also when he wants to introduce these characters into the game. And as you might expect, as you know, each story is actually built on the basis of like two levels. You have a main plot of the story always, and you have subplots to the story. In our case, we have some main storyline which tells the science fiction story that the creator of the game wanted to tell players, and we have a set of so-called alter storylines, these subplots that emerge, that are introduced to the story mainly on players' discretion. We as designers never know, and if we don't know, that means that we have to foresee that whether the player introduces a character in first act or second act or third act of the game. We never are sure whether the character will be there to participate in certain events, to participate in certain changes in main storyline. But we did even more because we interweaved, we interconnected alter storyline with the main storyline, which is, trust me, it's a pain in the ass, because imagine that we have a storyline which tells you basically linear story, but the parts of this linear story are non-linear because they are either waiting for NPCs or they are dependent in other ways on what NPCs are doing, what the player is doing with these NPCs, and that's the thing that we did actually bad, because there are a set of characters, especially there are 3 characters in the game which are called technician and scientist and botanist, which whose storylines are so interconnected with main storyline that at some point we realized that we cannot move with a storyline if something bad happens to these characters. And on some stage of making the game, we stood before the question: what do we do? Because when technician or scientist or botanist, something bad happens to them, then the storyline is soft lock or is crashed or something like that. And we decided to do something very not pleasant, because we decided that some of these characters has to be immortal. I don't know if you played the alters. Some of you probably played the alters. But would you know which characters in the alters are truly immortal, cannot die? Technician and scientist cannot die. They will be sick, they will be dying, but they will never die. With botanists, for example, we had another thing, because we interconnected botanists with the main storyline in many ways, because the idea was that botanist in his mind has a wife, but in reality, in the reality of main character Jan, this botanist's wife is Jan's ex-wife, and he actually doesn't keep contact with her anymore. Botanist wants to be a part of this story. He wants to talk to his wife. He wants to tell her that he still loves her, but it's not his wife. While the Lena, his wife, Jan's wife, ex-wife, is a very important part of the main storyline, and that means that main storyline has to react to what botanist does, and that means that we made dependent the main storyline, very dependent on alters choices, alters decisions, and that means what basically players' decisions. And I'm telling you about it because I promised you to tell that not only the scale of the project becomes the problem, but also how you tell the subplots, how much of the subplots you want to interweave into your main storyline. This is this can be very huge problem. We didn't do that with any other alters. As you might see on this higher logic diagram, many boxes are not interwoven, interconnected with the main storyline at the top. It's not because we learned our lesson, but we learned. But we just at some point, at some point we realized that we will never finish the game if we will continue that level of non-linear interweaving everything with everything. So we started to treat alter storylines like independent plots, independent subplots, and that's way to go actually, because well, we learned our lesson that it's worth it, but it's just a lot of work, just because it's a lot of work. When the story progresses, the logic of the game starts to look like this. You cannot see the details on these pictures, not only because the resolution is low, but the resolution is low because I didn't want you to see the details. Because, as you might expect, this is always work in progress. This is always messy. This is always reacting to something that we thought about, to something that we were told that works in the game, not as intended, because the system got so complicated that it's no longer the case, right? This was very easy. We had total control over everything, but we end up with something like this. Next thing is that somehow we managed to make this whole system work. Well, it works. But when you make such a complicated, non-linear, interwoven narrative system for the game, one of the most important departments becomes QA. And QA, as I wrote it, especially that good QA is a malicious QA. QA does things that we don't want to be done. QA does things like, for example, we have a botanist who has to solve very important thing in the main storyline, and QA does something that is absolutely bad. It kills botanists, for example. We're waiting for the botanist to save the world, and QA kills botanists. And what can we do? The story stops there, right? For example. And believe me or not, believe me, the repros, the bugs that QA in such a system is starting to report, well, happen to be very, very funny. There are bugs like 100% repro. Let character A talk to character B, then let character C go outside and do something, then sleep for 2 days, and then watch how base explodes, or something equally funny. And this happens a lot. Why I'm talking about this is kinda, I think, obvious. When you do such a complicated narrative-driven game, you have to have good QA, and you have to remember that you will test this game, you will find bugs for these in this game for a considerable amount of time. And I mentioned earlier that we had two approaches with mixing subplots with main plot. And in some cases, like technicians, scientists, botanists, we decided, oh, it just happened so, to mix the stories with main storyline. And the effect of this, because I don't want to tell you that it's bad, I want to tell you that it's hard. Because the effect of this is that the story is immersive. We gave the player a feeling that he can actually change the course of the story. What player does, what characters he wakes up, when he wakes, these characters have a real, true impact on the world, on the story itself. while the subplots, the alter storylines, which are more independent from the storylines, tend to be less interesting. Players treat these less connected alters like somewhat worse alters, less interesting. So the conclusion is that it can be a lot of work. I'd say that it's much easier if you keep things tidy and you construct this whole logic for narrative system as independent as possible. When you make actually, like I told you at the beginning, that nonlinear story you can treat as a bunch of stories, and that is what actually is the easiest thing to do. You can do that, but in the end, what players like most and what players think is the most interesting is not a set of independent stories, but it's a set of totally interconnected stories that feel like, well, real life, real mess. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but after all, it's worth it. I can answer a set of questions, of course. Thank you. I thought it will take more time, actually. Probably I forgot to say something important.
So, how can I make our system simple but make a player feels like it's complex?
That's what we were trying to figure out, yeah, and we didn't succeed, as you can see. We don't know that yet. We're getting there. We're getting there. What I proposed, what I told you, that making a set of stories not entirely dependent on each other, but for example, you make simple connections. You have connection at the start of the story, for example, and you have connection at the end of the story. That can be interesting enough. It's totally non-linear. It gives you something like this, right? This is the scheme. You can treat each part of this dialogue as a storyline. It will work. It will be connected to the world in certain places. The world will react to it at certain players' choices, and it will be easy. But like I said, well, it's always your choice, because these, when you have connections there, and there, this is much more interesting than this, right? This, you have storylines that are connected to main storyline on the beginning, in the end, maybe somewhere in between, rarely. But the most interesting thing is that thing that you just lose control over it.
Oh, hi, I'm also Borys.
Hi, Borys.
And I'm also a narrative designer. What tool do you use for nonlinear writing?
For what?
For nonlinear writing, what tool do you use?
That would be Google Excel,
Okay.
Google Sheets.
Okay, so
we don't have a special tool for that. We are talking about it, and our writer our writer Kasia, who came to us actually from movies, because formerly she was a movie screenwriter. She kinda didn't want to wait for specialized tool, and she just used the tool we had, and the tool we had is Google Drive and Google Sheets.
Oh, and also.
But for implementing, we have this tool, right?
Yeah, and that's your internal tool or some.
Yes, that's
Okay.
that's a tool. I mentioned that it's called Nodi. It doesn't matter. It's built in Unreal using actually Unreal built-in machine state tools. It's not ideal, but it works.
And have you tried RTC Draft or something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah. I mentioned that we started with RTC, but the reason that we dropped RTC was well, mainly because our programmers said that the level of complexity and the level of interaction between dialogues and the world is too big, and they have troubles with connecting RTC to our system, so they just prefer to make their own system than make these connections and embedding RTC into our system built in Unreal. So we ended up here.
Yeah, because we tried RTC and it has like so many options to work with. It feels like overwhelming, kind of. Also, did you also have that problem, or was it more about the
If I remember
implementation?
we had problems with programmers had some problems with connecting RTC with our game, but also we had problem with using same assets by different people at the same time. We had problem that this all needed dedicated RTC server, so it was another point of failure in the system. And also we needed very custom tools, like just an example, changing emotions of actors during the dialogue, and it could be done in RTC, I think, but it would be interlocking RTC with the system and sending some data back and forth just to make it work.
Hi, I have a bit of a narrative question for how do you have any tips on covering up a character that could die during the narrative? I think you've had to do that a lot, since you pointed out that 2 of the characters had to be effectively immortal. And I've seen some games where it was pretty obvious that, oh, this character disappears from the cutscenes, they're gonna die. They're gonna die for sure, they're optional. That's all.
Well, we did optional narratives that you don't see. Almost each storyline has built-in mechanism of what happens when Alter dies. And in some cases the storyline is just shut down. But of course, if you interconnected this storyline with other Alter storylines, well, Alters are waiting for this dead Alter to make something, to do something. That gets complicated. So we have to resend that information that he is dead, and we have to do something. There is no such thing. Still, there is no such thing like emergent narrative. Every emergent narrative has to be prescripted narrative. Or maybe artificial intelligence will kind of change that, but not yet. Everything that happens in the world, every emergent thing that happens in the world is just prescripted, and we were sending information, and because the problem is not that not that big actually. It's not a problem that you won't be able to proceed with the game, but the problem is that your story in the game can be soft locked and at some point, right? Which in some cases you might think that it's okay, that's what should happen because he died and the story stopped. But in other cases, so it's a case by case actually thing. In other cases, you just want to that storyline to move on, but differently, right? So it's always sending and resending information. Okay, this guy is dead, so don't wait for him. Just move on to this guy.
Hi, thank you for showing some of the internals. It is always helpful because it makes me feel more secure about my own work.
It's always funny to have fun, right?
Exactly. So you've mentioned that your writer has background in screenwriting, and one of the important things about screenwriting is that the writer not only controls what events happen, but when they happen and the pacing between them. But in video games, since the player is in control of the pacing, it could be that something happens and then for an hour nothing happens. And the issue is mainly that in screenwriting you usually have this intensity of reveals. Basically, reveals are intensified until the end of the script. But in video games it could be you have a lot of stuff and then nothing happens. And for example, Sam Barlow in his work often struggles with it, like her story, Immortality, that the player can find something and then for an hour they are lost. So how do you make sure that at least once 20-30 minutes something happens but it is actually exciting?
That's a good question, because that's a question we had to, well, that was a problem we had to solve somewhat. And we are not very happy with our solution actually, because it's not ideal. We didn't have time to, well, I wanted to make a sort of storyline manager, a system that would treat every storyline, not only huge storylines, but small things like small events happening between characters. We have such things, those so-called emergent events. I wanted to treat all of them like a set of assets that we can use. And for example, this system would behave in this way that if he would detect that we have some hole in the narrative, that it's stalled, that we didn't tell anything interesting for last 5 minutes, he would grab some asset from some possible asset and he would start it, right? But we didn't do that system because we didn't have time for that. And so we have another system which we called storylines continuum. That is actually less sophisticated, and it depends on sending and checking events. So we can do actions related to events that happened, to events that happened 2 days ago, that happens to events that didn't happen yet. We can delay some storylines, some narrative events due to the fact that the other event is still happening. We can block if we have events set in modules of the base. We can block module that other event wouldn't start in this module, while this module is blocked by some other event. And after some time, we can check whether this module was, free to be occupied for a day, and we can start such an event. So it's a whole set of checking parameters, checking events, pain in the ass. You're welcome.
maybe did you do some research in like real world, and what kind of research did you do for the narrative?
I don't know. Every one of us did some research. Well, the point, similarities to some other, texts of culture and other games are kind of visible, but the idea, our games director Tomek, his idea was that he wants to tell quite an original science fiction story. So he was actively, when there were some similarities to, I don't know, Interstellar, Death Stranding, and so on, he was actively removing the traces
I actually meant like research in psychology or
right.
not dev, spaceships and space traveling, physics and stuff like that.
We all know things about space travel, but actually you reminded me that on some stage of the project, the construction of characters of alters were consulted by psychiatrists, and she was, but it was work done by our writer. But yes, she consulted whether this character is really enough in the interstellar setting and extraterrestrial setting.
Hi, my question is about the narrative design. How was the narrative design or the story design for this game? Did you had endpoint and starting point and endpoint, or did you started and you were branching it out and then you decided this is the end?
Well, as you might see there, does it look like it was all prepared, right? The thing is that if I remember your question correctly, we started with very linear, very well defined story with main character and his first alter, which was technician. And then we were adding new alters to the story, as player does. And along this way, we were kind of learning how to do that. We were making such mistakes like interweaving Botany's story with main storylines in so complex ways that we, in some stage of making game, we totally lost control over it. It was running ongoing joke that something happened with the botanist because QA thought of something that we didn't think of earlier, and something happened. So it was ongoing process. We were learning on our mistakes. We were making stories less relevant, less connected to main storylines. But instead of this, we thought that maybe we can, because we wanted them to be interesting, we wanted them to be immersive, so we thought that maybe if you don't want to connect subplots to main plot so intensively as we did earlier, we can connect them with each other. We made such storylines like by making tattoo for a doctor, which the storyline uses 3, I think, other storylines to be complete, but it's not connected to main storyline because we didn't want that to happen anymore. So we started from a very simple thing. Story about being stranded on the other planet, making your first alter. Then first alter says, make more alters, so we did that.
Hello, my name is Martin. I would like to ask, what are the decisions that lead between deciding this is a new sub-story that I want to incorporate into a certain altar against we're gonna need another altar, like a new character? Does your story writer basically say, now we've got enough material to introduce a new character into the whole setup, and now we have to reconsider the relationships between yet another n+1 character in the setting?
From a certain point, we started to insert characters not one by one, but by packs. So when we had scientists, technician scientists, and maybe botanists, then we inserted like miner, worker, refiner, and then we inserted doctor, shrink, and guard in packs. So they are interconnected in packs. That's how we did, and also we wanted to have many more altars than we have, because there were plans that we want to have 18 altars, then 12, then 9.
Hi. Maybe you use both. Maybe you use one more often. Maybe exclusively one, but if you have a storyline and maybe you want to introduce some side characters that will intertwine with the main storyline, or maybe sometimes do you have also a character that you forcibly want to intertwine, like you have a concept for a character that you want to expand on and you want to intertwine with the main storyline. So is it like a natural process for, I need right now some kind of technician within the main storyline, so we will create their character? Or is it like we also have this concept of technician? How do we make it work? Like, do you use both? And if yes, which is more often?
I don't know. It's a collective work. Our writer thinks of something, then we talk, and like I said, from the certain point in the game, we just hated the idea of connecting new characters to main storyline, and our own writer, she didn't like the idea. We were talking about removing botanist totally from the game because he was pain in the ass. So all these versions happened.